Would a Crash and Spyro crossover mainline game work? Let's talk about it.
Whoa!
What's up guys, Canadian Guy here, and back with a brand new Crash and Spyro video. Probably one of my most asked questions on the channel is what would I think of a Crash and Spyro crossover game, and how would it work? Now, depending on my thoughts at the time, I might have given a slightly different answer depending on who asked and when it was asked, but I really wanted to sit and think on this and give a concrete video as an answer. Now, before I begin, to those who are already screaming in the comment section just by looking at the title of the video, yes, I know, we already had a crossover game on the Game Boy Advance. I'm talking about a full-fledged mainline game, and just one game, not a subpar dual game cash grab from the dumpster.
So uncivilized.
Now, it's easy to make any crossover, but how do we make a good crossover? The first thing you have to do when it comes to crossovers is find the common denominator between the franchises you're crossing over. The common denominator is fancy wording for saying what is similar or exactly the same between the two franchises. Whatever falls in the common denominator should be an easy one-to-one transition to the crossover. So, let's take a look. Crash and Spyro are both platformers that have companions that follow them around to protect them from damage. They can defeat most enemies with a single attack, and there is mostly a boss at the end of each world. Some games also let you play as different characters, depending on the level, who also have different playstyles to the original characters. Some games also have hub worlds to select your next level and allow at least a minimal amount of exploration. And that's it! Those are the common denominators between Crash and Spyro. This is where we encounter a bit of a snag when it comes to this idea of a Crash and Spyro platforming crossover game. While, yes, they are both platformers, Crash and Spyro approach the genre with two completely different mindsets. The Crash mindset is much like the original arcade style of platformers. Getting to the end of the level is the challenge, getting from A to B and finishing at C in a more linear format. There are collectibles on the way that are fun to grab and help your score at the end. There is even the time trial mode, which focuses on how fast you can run through the level. But then you have the Spyro mindset. While the game does require you to get to the end of the level, it's not that hard, but the levels are wide and full of fun secrets. There is no A, B, C, it's just all in one encompassing level. You also can't progress if you haven't explored and collected enough stuff yet, like gems, orbs, dragons, or eggs. So the game encourages you to find these secrets and get that satisfying feeling of getting all the gems and 100%ing the game. The way that both of these games give you that dopamine rush is also very different. Now, this is very important. Crash's dopamine rush happens right when you reach the end of the level. You are screaming and shouting at the game because of its challenges and obstacles. But when you get to the end, you leap for joy because you overcame a challenge, which then your brain releases that dopamine and it comes out in one big lump sum. Spyro, on the other hand, doesn't quite have as big of a rush, but it's slowly released throughout the level. When you find gems and collectibles as they charmingly bounce to you, it's nice. And when you 100% the level, you get that satisfying completion feeling. Again, getting a nice rush of dopamine, but not as much as Crash. So, Spyro gives you small traces of that dopamine, while Crash gives it to you in one big lump sum. But the pendulum swings in both directions. If you die in Crash, that lump sum of happiness turns into one lump sum of anger.
See, I got a buddy here!
But likewise, when you die in Spyro, the frustration is usually pretty minor. These differences are important for these games. It's what makes up their core DNA, and making a good crossover game is about balancing both games' DNA, because if you were to take a Crash game and make it not so challenging, you remove an important aspect of the game. And likewise, if you added great amounts of difficulty to Spyro, you added more of something that isn't quite core with the Spyro franchise. And then again, If you added linear levels to a Spyro game, you've removed the explorative aspect, and likewise, if you added a deep exploring element to Crash Bandicoot, which, yes, there is some already to a degree, then it might be just too much. But on the same flip of a coin, adding features from each game may improve or give a fresh take on the franchise that it may have never experienced before. Imagine ways you could explore a level if Spyro knew how to wall run like Crash, or if Sparks could gain some of the abilities that the Quantum Masks have, but react differently on Spyro. Maybe Crash can use some of the elemental abilities from Spyro's arsenal to change how the masks interact. Like if Crash has some sort of a fire element and gets a Kano, he can create fire tornadoes that interact differently with the environment. Plus, there is a deep breadth of original ideas that could be designed and created between this duo. So I do think that a crossover could work, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to be quite difficult and quite the balancing act. Here is what I think would work. There would be homeworlds that both Crash and Spyro can explore. There would be levels that are specifically Crash levels, and levels that are specifically Spyro levels. Crash being linear and harder overall, but faster to complete. And Spyro's levels having more exploring action, but might take a lot longer to complete. This is done because while yes, they are both platformers, they both do it very, very differently. And if we had somewhat of a hybrid between them, I don't think it would make either fan base happy. Imagine more linear Spyro levels, or much more open Crash levels where it's about finding stuff than actual platforming and challenge. I think both fan bases would feel pretty alienated. There would be 7 levels in total per homeworld, 3 for Spyro, 3 for Crash, and 1 boss level where they tag team throughout. Some sections is Crash, other sections is Spyro. Think of Rush Hour from Crash Bandicoot 4, where you switch from Dingodile to Tawna partway through the level. Between the 3 levels, each one would thematically mirror the other. So, if there's a Spyro level that takes place in the Savannah for level 1, Crash's level 1 would also take place within the same Savannah theme. And likewise, if Crash has a level 2 in space, Spyro's level 2 would also have one as well. However, to maintain Crash 4's idea of increasing the difficulty ramping, gateways will unlock after the completion of a previous level from either Crash or Spyro. So when you enter a homeworld, there would be 2 active levels, a Spyro one and a Crash one. This essentially would be level 1 Spyro and level 1 Crash. If you complete the Spyro level first, the next set of gates open up for both Crash and Spyro, being essentially Crash level 2 and Spyro level 2, giving the player a chance to maybe bounce between the characters or blitz all of Spyro's levels and then Crash's levels. It's all up to the player. The main story collectibles would be the same for both characters, but what I think would be cool is that, like how Crash 4 handles getting 3 gems for collecting 80% of the Wumpa Fruit, you would be awarded 3 of the collectibles for completing the level with 80% of the Wumpa Fruit. And Spyro would get his 3 collectibles split and placed at different points in the level, with a 3rd collectible when you finish the level. In order to move on to the next homeworld, you need to have collected a certain amount of that story collectibles across both Crash and Spyro levels. But what about gems? People love to collect those. Are they just thrown away? No, of course not. Gems and boxes would contribute to 100%ing the level. 100%ing the level unlocks a skin for Crash or Spyro, deepening the desire to 100% the game. It also would be tied to achievements. If I was tasked on making a crossover game, this is how I would do it. To try and bring features from both sides of the franchise across to improve each other slightly, but to keep them in their own lane. But this is just an idea that's on paper. Maybe it checks off a bunch of boxes that would seem like it would theoretically work, but when it comes to the actual execution, it might just flop. It might feel like one half of a Crash game is being stitched with one half of a Spyro game. And then I gotta ask myself, do people want this? Do people want a game where the gameplay of Crash is isolated from Spyro and likewise Spyro is isolated from Crash? If so, what's the point of a crossover other than funny cutscenes? But then, if you combine the franchises into one unified product, because they both approach the platforming genre so differently, you're going to end up with something that is not going to appease both sides of the fan base. Overall, making a platformer crossover seems like it has a bigger risk than a reward. Most Crash fans also enjoy Spyro, and likewise, most Spyro fans enjoy Crash. The only purpose of this game in a marketing sense is to try to convert the die-hard Crash fans into buying Spyro games and die-hard Spyro fans into buying Crash games. But most of them already do that. So it comes down to, what's the point? Could my idea work? Absolutely. Maybe? I don't know, but it might just be better for these games to stand on their own merit in their own individual games. Now, that is for a platformer crossover. What I think would work is taking them both out of their native genre and putting them into a new genre. Think of the greatest crossover game of all time, Super Smash Bros. Most of these characters that are fighters in this game aren't from fighting games, but it still works because they were taken out of their genre and the rules don't apply there. Not to mention, this has already happened with Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, where we got Spyro characters and a Spyro level. But what if we had a game where it starred both Crash and Spyro in, I suppose it'd be a CTR 2? Where there are Crash tracks, Spyro tracks, maybe Crash and Spyro tracks combined, maybe a large diverse character pool from both game franchises. Who knows? But in terms of a platforming crossover game, I'm always open to great ideas, and if the Activision Crash and Spyro team think that they can create an absolute banger of a game, then I'm all for it. But I think it's really, really hard to pull off, and if done wrong, it's just going to alienate both franchises and make them feel both lukewarm. But what do you guys think? Do you think the Activision team should tackle this complex project? Comment below and let me know. Thank you so much to all those who not only support the channel, but myself and my family. Because of your contributions, I'm able to do this full time. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider clicking the join button or becoming a Patreon with the link in the description. I also live stream every Thursday and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come on by and say hi. Again, thank you to everyone, and I'll see you guys in the next video and or live stream.